Today we will be continuing part 2 of this manhwa. The story continues. The sashimi knife sliced through the zombies' heads with great ease. It was a perfect weapon. A smile crossed YuWon's face. It was worth moving quickly. The reward for the first zombie kill was quite generous for the effort it took. 100 points were hard to gain in the early stages of the tutorial, and the stats that came with the level up would be very useful. His arms and legs were stronger due to the power of the strength stat. The zombies appeared slower, while his body felt lighter with the power of the dexterity stat, and his body felt revitalized, while his breathing stabilized with the power of the constitution stat. YuWon kept moving. YuWon swung his knife, cutting down the zombies one by one in a flash. The system again notified you leveled up. YuWon gained multiple levels in one streak. Leveling up was quick in the beginning. Of course, it was also due to YuWon cutting the heads off of zombies as fast as he could. This feels great, a thought crossed YuWon's mind. YuWon laughed, seeing the endless number of zombies surrounding him. This was one of his reasons for selecting Hongdae for his tutorial location. The number of zombies directly correlated to the population of the region. And that would be consistent until the next area of the tutorial. Watching YuWon cut down dozens of zombies by himself, the people's reactions started to change one by one. Hold up. Could the zombies actually be pretty weak? Doesn't that seem pretty doable? Wherever you go, there will always be people without fear. A few people started joining the fight after witnessing YuWon slaughter the zombies. One of the boys was charged with a weapon in his hand while shouting. He dealt a strike to the zombie with his full power. But his axe got stuck at the zombie's shoulder, unable to cut it. What's up with these things? Why won't they die? The boy was terrified at the sight of being stuck with a zombie. He tried to pull the axe but to no avail. The next moment, the zombie got hold of his neck and bit him. No matter how hard you hit them in the head with a sword, zombies wouldn't die easily. It was no laughing matter, slicing the head of a zombie with a dull, old sword. Many got bit by the zombies, surprised that the zombies weren't so easy to kill. The toxins of a zombie are bound to be fatal to the participants of the first tutorial. The rewards from the early stages of the tutorial were extremely important. Among the people who were quick to act that day, a few of them would probably make it to the upper floors of the tower. But of course, it won't be easy. YuWon made a cut, but the knife didn't feel like it was making as smooth a cut anymore. It felt as though the knife had become dull. However, that was not the reason. YuWon made a sound of disapproval while kicking away a zombie. The effect must have worn off. YuWon opened his bag to take out another bottle. Although the zombies were stronger than normal humans, and it was hard to take them down, but they had a fatal weakness. He pulled out another bottle in a hurry and threw it in the air. He cut the bottle apart with his sword, wetting the blade with its contents. The salty, fishy smell pierced YuWon's nose. It's definitely working. YuWon remembered a distant memory, something one of his companions told him right after they entered the tower. The man in his past memory said, "Unlike you, I don't have any talents. Seriously, compare me to anyone, and it becomes obvious how untalented I am." YuWon replied, "At least you still survived." "I was lucky." The man further said, "I made an amazing discovery in the first tutorial." "The first one? Don't you just have to survive against zombies in that one? Do you know where I used to work?" YuWon was confused back then, so he asked, "Work? Why are you bringing up your work? What was your job?" The old man replied to YuWon saying, "I manage salt evaporation ponds. The zombies in the first tutorial, their weakness is salt." YuWon thought the man I met on the first floor was quite fortunate. Right about now, unlike most people, he is probably hunting zombies with ease. Once again, the sashimi knife cut the zombie's head like it was butter. It was thanks to the salt water that YuWon had just poured on the knife. The system notified you have defeated 100 zombies in 10 minutes. You have achieved an unbelievable feat in the tutorial. YuWon's eyes widened. He wasn't expecting this kind of reward. You have obtained 3 unallocated stat points. Unallocated stat points will be distributed at random if and used by the end of the tutorial. It's possible to earn unallocated stat points in the tutorial? Unallocated stat points were a valuable reward. You gain stats at random when you level up, so unallocated stat points were very useful since they could be used to raise any stats you wanted. Your level becomes harder to raise the higher it is, but unallocated stat points were completely separate from the leveling system. Should I save it for later? Currently, arcane power was disabled. Arcane power would only be available starting in the middle stages of the tutorial. It was the most efficient stat, as well as the hardest to raise. That was arcane power. But instead of saving the points for later, it might be better to use them now for an immediate power boost. YuWon made a decision after weighing his options. Let's save it for now. Looking at the big picture, it seemed like a waste to use unallocated stat points to crush some measly zombies. Besides, YuWon wasn't going to simply slash and stab the zombies anymore. It's the 10-minute mark. The number of zombies would start overflowing any second now. YuWon had to hurry and make his preparations. Where would be an adequate place? YuWon looked around as he cleared himself a path by slicing and dicing zombies. The streets had devolved into absolute chaos from the battle between people and zombies. In the midst of his search, a place caught YuWon's attention. Found it. Kim Myeong-hoon swung his old knife. Once again it didn't go as expected. He couldn't get a clean cut on the zombie's head. Why isn't this working? He couldn't figure out the reason. YuWon, who charged into the zombies faster than anyone else, slayed the zombies like it was nothing. In comparison, Myeong-hoon, as well as others, were barely killing one zombie after multiple slashes. Is it because the blade is dull? YuWon wielded a different knife. Instead of a worn-out knife, he used the sashimi knife and machete he happened to have on hand. Damn it! If only I had a proper weapon like him. The zombie with its head half-split open roared. The nasty stench was unbearable. Startled, Myeong-hoon kicked the zombie in the chest. What the hell? The zombie must have felt no pain. After falling down, it got back up like it was nothing. Kim Myeong-hoon stared at the unfaltering zombie in disgust. Hey Myeong-hoon. Is it just me, or are they growing in numbers? As their stamina was reaching its limits, Myeong-hoon's friend asked him this question. He bit his trembling lips. He knew it as well. Instead of decreasing, they're multiplying. There was no way they could handle this many of them. They were surrounded by zombies on all sides. Here was no way to escape, nor did they have any strength left to continue fighting. Their fates were sealed. Can we hold these zombies off? How are we supposed to survive in this situation? How the hell are we supposed to do that? Kim Myeong-hoon heard the answer at that moment. YuWon! Where did YuWon go? There was only one way to survive now that they were surrounded. Kim YuWon. They had to receive his help. YuWon's skill was the real deal, being able to cut zombies like they were made of tofu. He's gone! Hell, where did that punk go? Myeong-hoon kept looking around but he could not find YuWon anywhere. It was just like he disappeared from the chaos. They're coming Myeong-hoon! Someone shouted at Myeong-hoon while he was distracted. The zombies were closing in tighter on them. Kim Myeong-hoon swung his knife with all he had. At that very moment, his eyes opened wide. A fragment of his knife had fallen to the ground. The knife he was swinging broke in half. Are you kidding? Though completely dull, it was at least something that Myeong-hoon could use as a weapon to protect himself. Now, he no longer had a way to defend himself against the zombies. A zombie got within spitting distance, widening its jaws at Myeong-hoon. A nose-piercing stench. Rotten teeth that would soon tear him apart. He screamed, helplessly watching the zombie that was about to take his life. Something was off. The zombies suddenly stopped moving. What's going on? Why did these zombies suddenly disintegrate? They hadn't reached the stated time limit yet. There was no reason for the zombies to freeze. And that wasn't the weirdest part. The zombies started to twitch, screaming in pain. They were monsters that didn't feel any pain, no matter how much their arms and legs were cut, even withstanding broken bones. Yet, suddenly they were crying in agony, falling one by one to the ground. The zombies' rotten flesh started melting as if they had been splashed with acid. Hey, something's falling. What is it? Kim Myeong-hoon raised his head, following his friend's observation. Lost in terror, he hadn't noticed it. There were things falling from the sky. Myeong-hoon reached out for one of them with the palm of his hands. It was a familiar-looking crystal. He wanted to confirm his suspicions, so he licked it. Salty. It was a familiar taste. It was salt? Myeong-hoon looked up again. Salt was raining down from the skies. The cries of the zombies echoed below. It was quite pleasant, watching the zombies cry in agony. Normally, they wouldn't let out a peep, no matter how much you stabbed them or severed their limbs. YuWon at that time gained multiple levels at once. A stream of notifications came from the system. YuWon mumbled to himself, pouring out the next sack of salt. Is this the last one? At the 20-minute mark, when the number of zombies had peaked, YuWon brought the salt he had prepared to the top of the building. Jumping between the rooftops of the buildings, he dumped salt over the horde of zombies. The final sack of salt was unleashed. The salt crystals dispersed far away, falling on the zombies like raindrops. Once again, the zombies' heads and bodies started disintegrating. Countless level-up notifications popped up. A pleasant smile dawned on YuWon's face. This feels great. YuWon wondered how many zombies he massacred. He knew it had to be at least in the thousands. YuWon's question was soon answered. The system notification came ringing, finalizing the first tutorial, Survivors, 4077. A lot of people died. After seeing the number of survivors, YuWon let out a sigh. Since the Hongdae sector's starting population was approximately 12,000, it meant 8,000 people died in this sector alone. I guess 4,000 survivors isn't too bad. Before, in the first tutorial, more than 80% of the people hadn't made it. Especially in sectors like Hongdae, where there were a large number of zombies, it wasn't out of place for there to be no survivors. Taking that into account, 4,000 was a lot of survivors. The system again notified rewards for defeating enemies are being distributed. Defeated enemies, 1427. You have obtained 1427 points. You have obtained additional random stat points. Strength and stamina increased by 1. You have obtained 1 unallocated stat point. You have killed most enemies and obtained 500 points. You have achieved an unbelievable feat. You have obtained 1,000 points. And I sure killed a lot. 1,427. That was the number of zombies YuWon killed. If he had just mindlessly cut down zombies with a knife, it would have been impossible to slaughter that many in 30 minutes. In total, it was over 3,000 points. That was an amount that should have been impossible to obtain in the first tutorial. Most tutorial participants only managed to kill 1 or 2 zombies, 10 at most. So most of them started with 1 to 10 points. I think I started with 10 points in the past. Since he had done sports and because he had the guts, he remembered having hunted a few zombies. Compared to back then, this was an unbelievable starting point. The total value of his stats was 88. And if you counted the unallocated stat points, his stats totaled 92. This is a ridiculous amount to earn in the first tutorial. Zombies don't give a lot of experience. No matter how many you killed, level 3 or 4 should have been the limit in the first tutorial. The system notifies the second tutorial will start in 10 minutes. The next tutorial was... As YuWon stood back up and was just thinking about the next tutorial, he heard a voice. Hello, everyone. A cheerful voice in stark contrast to the situation could be heard. The voice caused the commotion below to die down, freezing people in their steps, including YuWon. Congratulations on your survival. There are a lot of survivors here, aren't there? I'm honestly shocked at how many survived. There was chaos on the street for Hongdae. Everyone was looking up in the sky to find the source of the voice. Who was that? What, did you hear that as well? Where is it coming from? The lackey continued, I have an announcement for the survivors. Normally, I would make this announcement after the second tutorial. But this will be an exception this time because someone met the requirements too quickly. The voice wasn't loud, but everyone could hear it clearly. It was different from the system's message. Unlike the robotic, toneless message, this voice felt like it belonged to an actual person. YuWon raised his head, realizing whose voice this was. A lackey. The voice belonged to the administrator's lackey in charge of the tutorial. Unlike real administrators that were in charge of an entire floor, they were merely gophers for the administrator, overseeing one of the tens of thousands of sectors. However, they still had to be regarded as powerful supernatural beings for now. I don't remember them appearing in the second tutorial. The reason why they weren't actually showing themselves is probably because of that person. Before, lackeys would have started appearing only during the start of the third tutorial. The first tutorial had two objectives. The first was to get rid of those unqualified to move on to the next tutorial. The second was to test those qualified to move on. However, more people survived in Hongdae than the administrator intended. The reason was simple. It's because of YuWon. YuWon killed a zombie before everyone else, inspiring a mob mentality. There are different ways to overcome fear. One of them is watching someone else overcome it, and seeing YuWon fight gave the courage for others to also fight. There was also YuWon's massacre of the zombies with salt. At least in the places where I spread the salt, there should be a lot of survivors. Was that why, perhaps? The lackey's voice was filled with excitement, as if they had just found a new source of entertainment. The lackey continued, there is only one announcement. It is how to use your points. Now, everybody claps. The word announcement brought hope to the people. An announcement? What is it? Can we go home now? Of course, everyone desired the same thing. Return home unless you were a psychopath with a few screws loose. No one would ever want to run from zombies, fight against them, or watch people die in front of them. They clapped obediently, feigning excitement, but you could tell their hearts weren't in it. It wasn't a way to return home. Their disappointment was immeasurable. Still, some people were paying very close attention to what Lackey had to say. These were your typical survivors, the people who were fast to adapt. The Lackey mentioned, there are two main methods to use your points. The first is by utilizing the shop. Now this is a really amazing thing. There are items beyond your imagination available. The second way is to use it as currency. You all like money, don't you? You can give or receive points by shaking hands with someone. The shop, the name sounds very underwhelming, but the shop that Lackey mentioned had a very important role in this world. They say that you can even become a god as long as you have enough points for a reason. Levels and points. From here on out, it would be a battle for those two. You could spend your points at the shop. Additionally, you could surrender your points to someone in exchange for their cooperation or some other compensation. So, as stated by Lackey, points were this world's currency, as well as its power and authority. Time's up. Wasn't that a sweet break? That's it for the announcement. Now, it's time for you to struggle again. Those were the last words from Lackey. It was now the start of the second tutorial. The system notified, in the center of the sector, a safe zone has been created. Please enter the safe zone. A yellow shield formed at the center of buildings to accommodate and protect the survivors. Once every 3 hours, 100 points will be distributed. The second tutorial begins. Some moments later, the shield formed a spherical layer around the center. All survivors started rushing towards the center. Safe zone? Is that it? People gathered in the oval that had appeared on the ground. The safe zone was a long oval divided into multiple colors. The center was purple, and the outer ends were red. Hey, let's go. Fucking hell. What in the hell is going on? Myeong-hoon put his hand on his forehead and tried to understand the situation. Where's Chang-ho? Hell if I know. He probably died. Myeong-hoon and his friends started heading to the safe zone while chatting. Luckily, the safe zone was pretty close. They happened to have been near the center of the sector. Kim Myeong-hoon looked around in confusion. One of his friends asked out of curiosity, "What's up? What are you looking for?" "It's nothing. Now that I think about it, I don't see that punk YuWon." People started gathering in the safe zone. It wasn't the strangest thing, not being able to find him in a crowd of thousands. One of Myeong-hoon's friends said he wouldn't have died. No way. That guy definitely survived. You're right. He was fighting like an absolute beast. Maybe that's his calling? They started muttering amongst each other. YuWon's skill was definitely the real deal. That's why Kim Myeong-hoon and his buddies searched for YuWon. They thought that they would be safe if they followed him. "Hey, where are you going?" That's when Myeong-hoon saw YuWon in the distance, cutting through the crowd. After a short hesitation, Myeong-hoon waved his hands and ran towards YuWon. Hey! Kim YuWon! Having heard his name, YuWon stopped in his tracks, turning his head towards him. "Kim Myeong-hoon? Where are you going?" "That's the wrong way. Didn't you hear that we're supposed to stay in the safe zone?" Myeong-hoon spoke in a friendly tone, unlike before. Things were different now. He knew that nothing good could come from being at odds with YuWon. "I don't want to admit it, but being next to this bastard is the safest option," Myeong-hoon thought to himself. Fortunately for him, YuWon didn't seem like he was in a bad mood. Even a guy like that should know that nothing good can come from being mad at me right now, Myeong-hoon thought. YuWon should also be in need of a team. 2 is better than 1, and 3 would have a better chance of survival than 2. If I just reach out to him like this. Myeong-hoon was in thought when he heard YuWon. "I know. I have somewhere I have to go," YuWon said, tapping Myeong-hoon's shoulder. YuWon further said, "If you want to survive, don't try to latch on to someone. Be a good boy and wait over there. Know your place. Don't try to act up like a hero." "What? You punk!" YuWon walked away, not concerned with what Myeong-hoon had to say. He was headed in the complete opposite direction of the safe zone. Myeong-hoon was conflicted. Should he really let YuWon go? I have a feeling it'll be safest to stick with him. After watching YuWon walk further away from him, Myeong-hoon made up his mind, heading into the safe zone. I mean, there's no way it'll be safer than the safe zone, right? And just like that, Kim Myeong-hoon returned to the safe zone. At that moment, the man that was walking behind Myeong-hoon hit his head on something, knocking him back a few steps. "What is this? It's blocked off. I thought they wanted us to go in there." The people who weren't able to make it into the safe zone banged on the invisible wall. Myeong-hoon turned around to watch the ruckus. But he got startled the moment he lifted his head. Myeong-hoon and everyone looked up in the sky to look at the screen shown above the dome. And right at that moment, words popped up on the invisible wall of the safe zone. Capacity 2038/2038. It was exactly half the number of survivors from the first tutorial. Myeong-hoon, one of the last people to make it into the safe zone, became lost in thought, looking out through the invisible wall. The safe zone was created at the start of the second tutorial, and that safe zone had a maximum capacity. That would mean, Myeong-hoon's thoughts were interrupted as he heard screams. "Over there! It's a monster!" Clearly, it meant that it was dangerous outside of the safe zone. What is this?" Only Kim Myeong-hoon shook in fear, staring at the absolute chaos that unfolded outside the safe zone. Countless bugs with gargantuan mouths shot their heads out of the ground and feasted on the people. "Save me!" The cries from afar made YuWon hasten his pace. YuWon kept on slicing through the bugs that came out of the earth, killing them to make his way toward his destination. A bizarre, deflated cry came from the ground. It was the result of YuWon throwing his sashimi knife down. So it started. The second tutorial was an event that gave out 100 points every 3 hours. Being given points while you do nothing. At first, it sounds like a pretty great mission, but the tutorial was a trial to sort out people to enter the tower. There was no way it would be that easy. The system window popped up notifying me, "You were the first to kill an earthworm. You have obtained 300 points. You have gained 2 random stat points." While the system was notifying YuWon kept his pace steady and walked down the stairs looking for more earthworms. After a moment, the system notified, distributing 2 random stat points. Strength and dexterity increased by 1. YuWon felt good seeing the messages pop up. The tutorial was meant to set the standard for who can enter the tower, and for that, it gave out generous rewards to help people grow to meet that standard. After checking the messages, YuWon looked down at the bugs that shot up from the ground. It was a creature with a large mouth and sharp teeth. At first glance, it simply looked like a large worm. If you leave the safe zone, you become their target. That was the meaning of the safe zone. A zone that was safe from the earthworms. And YuWon was outside of that zone. YuWon walked down the stairs. He went on high alert and closed his eyes. I can't see them anyways. Earthworms hunted their prey by digging up through the ground. Therefore, walking with your eyes open was meaningless. When you close your eyes, your senses grow sharper, no longer relying on your vision. He had to rely on his sense of hearing, his sense of touch, and his instincts that surpassed his 5 senses. Suddenly the ground beneath YuWon's feet started trembling. YuWon raised his foot. The earthworm that burrowed up from the ground got its head crushed by YuWon stomping on it with perfect timing. YuWon withdrew his knife in an instant. He swung the knife, slicing the earthworm's head in a single sweep. The earthworm died. Its head was chopped off. The system window popped out notifying you leveled up. Strength, dexterity, and perception increased by 1. YuWon leveled up, even though he only killed 2 of them. He must have been pretty close to leveling up. Of course, the earthworms still gave good amounts of experience points. That was only natural. To begin with, earthworms weren't creatures that were designed to be subjugated in the second tutorial. However, unlike zombies, earthworms were relatively easier to kill. They were only dangerous in the sense that you couldn't see where they were coming from. YuWon kept descending the stairs. He went pretty far down. Earthworms live underground. They create a cave and build their nest inside it. YuWon opened his eyes and read the sign near him. Hongdae Station. The subway station was the largest underground area in YuWon's tutorial sector. Earthworms can't breathe underground. They're just able to hold their breath for a long time. That's why a large nest was essential for them. That's why they should be grouped up in the largest underground space. YuWon slowly opened his eyes. There was no longer a need for him to keep his eyes closed. He could see nothing but earthworms in front of him. He no longer had to pay attention to the ground, so he focused on what was in front of him. The system notified you, you have discovered the hidden dungeon, Hongdae Station. You have obtained 100 points. Bingo! This was no longer the Hongdae Station YuWon once knew. It was now the home of the earthworms whose mission was to eat the people who didn't make it into the safe zone. In other words, it had become a dungeon. YuWon withdrew his knife. Since I have found their nest, I have to do my best to level up. YuWon was excited, as it is now easy to kill earthworms, who often hide underground trying to sneak at their prey. YuWon held a knife and a machete in his hand as he took his stance. A thought crossed his mind. I will target level 20 for now. The earthworms discovered YuWon, squirming towards him. It was a sight to behold. Desperate to consume the prey in front of them, they must have forgotten that they were creatures that hunt from below. YuWon swung his knife and machete at the earthworms that approached him. It was an experience jackpot. How lucky for me. YuWon wasn't certain that the hidden dungeon would exist. Earthworms couldn't even be called monsters in the tower. They were really nothing more than bugs. But even they were dangerous monsters in the tutorial, and their ability to hide in the ground made them a great threat to those who still didn't possess proper skills or stats. What a great source of experience! YuWon cut down another earthworm that got close to him. The earthworms in front of him were no longer threatening monsters, they were simply large bugs with teeth. Now that I've found their nest, hunting them is going to be a piece of cake. Right at that moment, a marble fell out of the mouth of the earthworm YuWon just defeated. What? YuWon was silent for a moment. YuWon looked up at the rolling marble. What's this? YuWon smiled at the unexpected surprise. This was something you could obtain in the second tutorial. It was an interesting new find. This was undiscovered information because as far as YuWon knew, no one had managed to hunt an earthworm before during the second tutorial. YuWon slid the marble into his pocket. He now had a reason to try even harder. I'm currently level 17. YuWon thought about his original goal for the second tutorial and contemplated the minimum requirements to achieve his goal. First, let's get to level 20. He started walking towards the lovely bags of experience that were laid out in front of him. Time crawled by slowly. There was nothing to do. The people inside the safe zone had their heads turned away from the wall, keeping their eyes closed. Outside the safe zone was hell on earth. Pieces of human flesh littered the scene, and there were countless bugs snacking on corpses. I can't even kill a single cockroach. Rather than getting mauled by one of those things, I'd rather bite my tongue and kill myself. They can't get in here, right? No way. They said this place was safe. Even though there were 2,000 people present, there was little talking going on. They feared that if they were even just a little too loud, the earthworms might pop out from beneath them. The safe zone was quite quiet. It couldn't be helped, since everyone was cautious when speaking even a single word. Even more time passed. The system notified me, 3 hours have passed. You have obtained 100 points. Wow, points. So this is like money? Is 100 points a lot? Myeong-hoon and his gang also became interested in points. One was able to buy items from the shop with points. Up until now, they only had 2 or 3 points, but now they could afford some items from the shop. That's when it occurred. Suddenly the system window turned red, like giving a warning sign. It notified me, the red area has been activated. Everyone's eyes were wide open. The safe zone limit for survivors is 1,500. The next notification made everyone stop in their tracks. Their eyes are wide open and faces rose to look in the sky. They were stunned. In this chaotic situation, no one would be able to predict what could happen next. The system notified, when the max capacity is surpassed, people will be randomly expelled from the safe zone. Along with the message, a few people started moving. What the, just when exactly is it going to stop shrinking? What, I am getting forcefully pulled out. An invisible force dragged people outside the zone. The ground of the safe zone that was red returned to its original color. Those places were no longer safe, and the earthworms once again reared their heads. The people that were dragged outside and the people that were sitting on the outer edge of the zone were attacked. There was nowhere to run. No matter how far you ran, it would only be a matter of time before you got swallowed up by the bugs. Myeong-hoon checked how much time he had left. Remaining time, 2 hours and 57 minutes. So when time runs out, everyone thought that the colors on the ground probably meant something. And among those people, a few of them had considered the possibility that the safe zone might shrink over time. Myeong-hoon was one of them. The inner center was purple, and the outer parts of the zone had become orange. Move! That's my spot! Get away! Do you want to die that much? I'll kill you if that's what you want. People started rushing into each other. No one wanted to die at the hands of those earthworms. Get out of the way! Why are you blocking my way? In an instant, the entire place erupted into chaos. Myeong-hoon quickly came up with a plan on the spot. Everyone, quiet! He got up from his spot and shouted. For a short second, silence returned. Myeong-hoon calmed his fast-beating heart and opened his mouth. Starting now, we need to decide who to kill in order to live. There was a line dividing orange and yellow. Myeong-hoon continued his speech while staring at that line. It was a cruel thing to say, but it couldn't be helped. We can't all be in the center. If that happened, some people would be randomly tossed outside. That meant Myeong-hoon might be one of them. Myeong-hoon looked around in the crowd. Only one thought remained in his mind: I need to kill someone in order to survive. He noticed an old man in the crowd. Myeong-hoon went up and grabbed the old man by his collar, dragging him back. Everyone went into panic. No one could imagine killing others. I will kill this old man. That in order to live, you had to kill someone else. That was the central conflict of the second tutorial. On the other side, YuWon's axe split apart the earthworm's head. The charging earthworm flopped dead once its skull was cracked. It was split apart into 2 pieces along with its head. YuWon stopped for a moment, withdrew his machete, and kept on attacking. He was determined to achieve the highest possible rewards from tutorials one can. YuWon spun around the full force, swinging the machete that was in his other hand. In one swing, the 2 earthworms that were attacking from behind got their heads chopped off. All the earthworms' corpses were lying around YuWon. The system notified you, you have leveled up. Your agility, stamina, and perception increased by 1. Another marble fell on the ground. YuWon put this one away as well. His bag had become heavy, filled to the brim with marbles. After a moment, the system notified, you have achieved level 20. A new stat arcane power has been unlocked. With the level up, the message that YuWon was waiting for could be heard. Finally. YuWon was breathing heavily. Even though his constitution stat had increased greatly, he couldn't help being exhausted after moving around for 3 hours. Fortunately, with the level up, his constitution increased again, along with unlocking a new stat. This made his body feel lighter than before. His stats had improved a lot. Most of his stats were in the mid-20s, and he still had the unallocated stat points he had obtained as a reward. On top of that, he unlocked a new stat by reaching level 20. YuWon's stats already far exceeded what should have been possible in the second tutorial. 3 random stat points and 1 unallocated stat point from hunting earthworms. It wasn't a bad haul. However, it fell slightly short of his expectations. Well, until I defeat that guy, I shouldn't expect a better reward. YuWon used the unallocated points he had been saving up. Applying unallocated stat points. YuWon felt a surge of power entering inside his body. Arcane power increased by 5. He invested all the unallocated stat points he had been saving up in arcane power. Other people would have to work pretty hard to figure out what the arcane power stat was. YuWon, on the other hand, already knew the answer. Among the 5 stats, none of them were as important as arcane power. Arcane power reached 18. Not bad. YuWon closed his eyes for a second and nodded his head, feeling the arcane power flow inside him. YuWon had started with 13 arcane power. It was something he only discovered later, but 13 was unprecedentedly high. Someone who was untalented usually started with 5 to 6. Talented people generally had 9 to 11 as their starting stat. And a very small minority started with 12 stat points. They were described as having received the tower's blessing. And here was YuWon. He started with 13 points and had now achieved 18 arcane power. That's all for today. If you like the next part of this manhwa, just comment below. Thanks for watching, and please don't forget to like, subscribe and comment for getting epic content on this channel. See you next time.